Welcome to Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace. I'm Chester Stanley, your host, and today in the studio we're delighted to have Neila Manu with us. Welcome, Neila.
Hi Chester, thank you for having me here.
It's a pleasure to have you, and it's been a privilege to get to know you and for you to share your story with me. So we want to hear your story. Why don't we go right back to the beginning, and for you just to simply tell us about your childhood, and I think it goes way back.
Well, actually, I think the Lord has been with me since the day I was conceived.
Okay.
Because my mother was a girl that used to go on the boats.
Yes.
And so she met my father and conceived me there. So it was sort of just a thing that happened, I think.
Yes.
And then when I was born, she didn't want me, and so she wanted a train fare back from Wellington to where we're from in New Plymouth. And so she took me to the pub and raffled me in the pub.
Raffled you in a pub?
And luckily, well, I don't know, a cousin of mine was there and gave her the money for her train fare and took me back to her half-sister, who was very cruel to me from the time I was there until I was adopted at 4½, which the social welfare had to come in to take me off of her. And I was abused mentally, physically and emotionally. And when I was adopted, I went to another auntie by marriage, lived with her, but because she didn't understand how I was brought up or dragged up or whatever, she couldn't really handle me, and so I sort of lived like a little animal. I used to go and live under the house with the dog, sort of burrow, make a nest in the dirt under the house, and she thought I was mad. And because I wasn't used to living in a nice house with sleeping in a bed, I'd jump up and down on it. So she put wood planks underneath it so that I wouldn't jump up and down on the bed, but she just couldn't understand that I'm not used to living a normal sort of life. And so we sort of had heaps of trouble. I'd go to school, she'd send me to school, but I wasn't going to school to learn anything. I'd go to school to bash everyone up and eat all their lunch, because she'd send me to school with sugar sandwiches or sauce sandwiches wrapped up in newspaper, and so I'd bring these sandwiches out and all the kids would tease me. Yes. And then, like, she was probably not much better than the first auntie, because I went to school in rags that I just wore all the time. When they got holes, they got patched. I had shoes that had, this is true, I had shoes that had holes in them. Then she'd put cardboard in them, and so that only, you know, like a day they'd be worn through again. So I really lived a hell of a life. And my only life was at night time when everyone would go to bed, and I'd get up about 1 o'clock in the morning and I'd go up the road and steal this girl from, you know, rich family. She had her bike in the shed, and they left the shed open, so I'd go up there and grab the bike and ride around the town. You know, a little kid of about 8 or 9 or something, riding around town just to get my kicks, because I wasn't allowed to bring friends home. I wasn't allowed any toys. It was just really bad. And so there, in the end, I stole the bike and I took it to school, and I told the next day, that day, she said to me, "That looks like my bike." And I said, "No, it's not, it's mine." I said, my uncle brought me that bike." And she went home and told her family, and they got the police, and long story short, I was sent to a home in Christchurch. And that was really my saviour, because it was an institution, like it was really a girls' finishing school. But, you know, we were sort of locked up, but we learnt everything: ballet, tap, music, everything, modelling, everything. And so that sort of straightened me out and sort of gave me a bit of grounding, because at least I wasn't getting bashed around. I'd just get locked up if I was naughty. But it made me sort of more stabilised. And when it was time to leave there, I was the youngest one there because nobody wanted me. They didn't know where to put me. I remember even going to a mental home that they wanted to put me into, but because I was too young and there was nothing wrong with me, they wouldn't leave me there. And so then I had to go to this home in Christchurch, which when it was time to leave, I cried because I didn't want to leave it because it was my only stable thing I had in life.
So what happened after that, Neila?
I went to a Christian family from there in Littleton.
So by this time you were a teenager?
Yeah, I was 16, 17.
Yes.
And I went to a Brethren family in Christchurch, and they were lovely and everything was lovely there, but I still wasn't, maybe it was I didn't want to know what they had, what they were offering in terms of God. And so I didn't want to have anything to do with it. You know, I was sneaking out at night, and then they didn't want me. So I went to a hostel and stayed there, and then I went to Wellington and met my first husband, had my first child, and that didn't last very long. And I was just sort of floating around and going, while I was with my auntie before I went to the home, she was going to join all these churches, but she wouldn't go, and she'd send me thinking, well, I'm the one that needs it, not her. Right. And so she'd send me, but I wouldn't go. I'd just take the bus money and the collection money and go on a bus and go on these treks up we've got these big sugar loaves at New Plymouth, and I'd walk up them and spend the day down the beach, or we lived by the wharf, and sometimes Sundays you could go over the ships and have a look over them, and I'd be going on there, you know, like this little girl, like you'd die if your daughter was doing that nowadays. And here's me, you know, travelling, having a look over these warships and everything, you know, and still, you know, I know that I was looking for something or someone to help me, but it wasn't happening. And it wasn't until I left my first marriage, and then I met someone else and had 4 children to him, and that was quite a turbulent marriage. Well, I wasn't married to him, but that was very abusive and hectic, and so I left that one and went to Auckland and met another guy who I thought I loved, and because he was such he was into everything.
Okay.
And
I think this is we'll pause right there, Neila, and we'll go to a break, because I think this is a very significant part of the journey, this next bit. So we'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace, and we're with Neila Manu. Neila, just before the break you were sharing that you were just about to enter a new relationship, and I think financially things got a bit better. Anyway, you share with us.
Okay, yeah, I got into this relationship that I thought was the best thing ever. This handsome, blonde-haired, blue-eyed young man that said he loved me, and said that if I sort of followed him, that we could be well off, and things would be...
So he promised you financial prosperity.
Yeah, well, the world sort of thing.
Okay.
But the only catch was would be a bit of hard work involved, and I thought, oh well, I like hard work. And
so what was the hard work?
Gardening.
Gardening.
And
what sort of gardening? Can I ask you that first?
growing marijuana trees.
Okay.
And yeah, so he took me to show me the places that he used to grow in Coromandel and up north Auckland and that. And I thought, oh, this is great fun. Okay. And I love gardening. So we set out and started doing these huge plots and made a real lot of money out of it, and we never got caught. I think it's because there was only the two of us in it, and we just nurtured these beautiful things, and they grew into big beautiful trees, and we made a lot of money, a real lot of money. We had cars just about every second month. And
what, a new car?
Yeah, yeah, like you know, we could have started up a car yard. We had to sort of slow down because we would have had to have had a license for a car yard. So got all the kids' cars and motorbikes. We had everything. And
big house?
Well, we didn't have a house because we had a property though. We bought a beautiful property up at Kerikeri, and it was in an area where they were going to put a road through. There were judges and lawyers and everything that lived there, and there was a marina going in, and one side up the top of the hill you look down into this bay where the marina was going in, then down the other side there was another bay. It was a beautiful property, but we couldn't sort of have a lot of things in our name, so we put it in his sister's name, and that was, well, now it'd be worth millions of dollars, but we had that, and we didn't build it on it at the time, but we had everything. And then he got a job offer to come over here to Australia to work on the bypass through Yass, at the back of Yass.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I've always wanted to go to Australia. There's always been times when I've been sort of nearly able to come over, and then something happens and I don't. So he came over, and I thought, right, this time I'm definitely going. And so I waited for him to settle in, and then I came over. But with all our driving around back in New Zealand with boxes of elephant beer and boxes of Moët champagne, and the car just filled with marijuana, we're just out of it constantly, drunk and out of it. We were fighting and carrying on because, you know, you can't sort of live a perfect life with all this going on in your life. So it was very hectic and crazy, and so I thought, well, by coming over here we'd probably settle down and you know, slow down and live a better life. But when I come over, the first thing he wanted to do was check out to see where he could grow again, and I thought, hang on, we're not in New Zealand now, you know, it's a bit tougher over here. So
there was really a desire by you to start a new life when you came to Sydney?
I thought, well, you know, that was our life over then in New Zealand, and we're coming over here to start a new life, something different. And, you know, like we still had money because he had a good job, a proper job, and I thought, you know, I could get work, and so we'd live a normal life. But it didn't really happen like that, and he was still abusive. He was abusive before, but I stayed with it because I liked the exciting life. And yeah, but when it happened over here, I thought, oh, I don't need this now. I said, you know, I'm in another country, and I'm sure I can try and make a go of it here on my own. And so I left him, and the ladies in Yass put some money together for me to fly me back to New Zealand. And so I went to Sydney to wait for my plane to fly out, and I had 2 hours to wait. So I thought, heck, I'm in Sydney. I can't go back to New Zealand and tell all my friends, yeah, I was in Sydney, but I didn't go to King's Cross. They'd never believe me. And so I thought, well, I'm going to get a taxi and go up to King's Cross. At least then I can say I've been to King's Cross. So I went to the cross, and walking down the street, and walked past this tiny little cafe, and there was this young guy that I used to work with in New Zealand, in this little hick town in New Zealand. And I stepped back and I said, oh, what are you doing here? I said, how easy is it to stay here in Sydney, and how easy is it to find work? And he said, well, it's really easy. Just go down the street to any of the pubs and they'll give you work. And so I went down to this pub, and the manager said, well, we can't promise you anything today, you'll have to come back Friday and we'll be able to let you know then. So I said, well, I haven't got time, I've got 2 hours. If I don't know now, I'll have to go back to New Zealand. And so there was this guy sitting at the bar, and he said to me, he said, I hear you're looking for work, I can promise you work, but it's not going to be for a couple of weeks. And I said, oh, that's too late. He said, well, I'll ring my boss. He said, I'm painting a mural out at the old showgrounds, and I'll ring him and ask him if he needs any workers now, because they're always looking for workers. So he rang his boss, and he was a big boss of all the catering, you know, selling hot dogs and candy floss and all that stuff. So he rang him and he said, well, my housemaid has broken her arm and she's off, so I've got no housemaid at the moment. He was in his early 70s, I think then, and he said, if she can cook me a feed and drive a car, bring her around because I might be able to use her. So I went around, brought him a nice steak and some vegetables and took it around, cooked him a dinner. And he asked me if I could drive. I said yes. He said, well, I'm going down to Melbourne on Monday. Would you like to come down and be my driver? And once we get there, you can work in one of the canteens there. And I said, oh, that sounds great. So I went down with him. I was his driver. He hired me. I worked the canteens and came back and lived in this beautiful home that he had. Okay. I had my own flat underneath his house. Right.
Okay, why don't we just pause it there? We need to go to a break. Okay. And after the break, we will be right back. Welcome back to Amazing Stories of Amazing Grace. We're with Neila and Manu. We're enjoying your story, Neila. It's an incredible story. You're in Sydney. This older gentleman hires you as his driver, etc. So life's looking up in a sense. He lives in a pretty good house, and you've got an income, but then things didn't go too well.
I was just getting bored with it because it was a lot of hard work travelling, driving him to Melbourne, Adelaide, up to the Gold Coast. We lived in his penthouse at the Gold Coast, and then to Brisbane to do all these shows and that. And then he sort of thought, well, you know, maybe I don't have to pay her now and again. You know, she's living in this beautiful apartment.
Looking after her, I'm caring for her.
So, you know, I was his bodyguard, and so I was more or less, I think he sort of thought like, maybe like a partner sort of thing that, you know, you don't need too much pay. You know, I'll still look after you. Okay,
so you moved out of that situation?
And then I went and looked after a lovely old man. I cared for him, and I stayed in this little matchbox of a room. And then I met a friend that I've known since I've been in Sydney. We were sort of friends for a long time, and he said to me, well, you know, you can come and stay with me. And I said, oh, okay then, you know, I don't want any real attachments. As long as I can just stay with you, we'll be friends. And, you know, he knew I've got the smoke, because I've always got the smoke. Because I wasn't growing it here in Australia, I was smoking from the time I woke up to the time I went to sleep anyway. And so I had to now purchase it and sell it so that I could still have my smoke and, you know, not be spending any of my own money on it. So, he thought, oh yeah, get on to Neila, you know, she's okay, and we don't have to have a lot of sex and all this, and yeah, that's fine by me. So I moved in with him, and things were still getting bored. You know, in the end, I sort of come at a crossroads in my life, and I thought, oh, I'm just sick of all this, I just want to get out of it, you know, out of everything, what shall I do? And then there was this little cave down at Bondi that I used to go down and have a joint now and again just to get away from everything and thinking that it's going to help all my problems. And I thought, shall I just leave everything and go and live in this little cave and not worry about anything? And the only thing that stopped me is because of my children. I thought, well, I don't want them to be meeting up with our friends and that. And they say, how's your mother? Oh, don't hear too much of her now, you know, she's in a cave. And so that stopped me. And so I ended up, I got robbed and attacked, and that's another story. And I tried to sue the supermarket, this big shopping centre, because they should have been looking after everyone, and they hadn't. So they wouldn't have that, but they said, well, we'll send you to a psychologist. So they sent me to this wonderful woman.
And this lady quite helped you, didn't she, I think?
Yeah, and she sort of got me into studying to try and get me out of my depression. And so I started studying my tertiary, and then one day I was looking at TV and...
Okay, we need to come to this point now. So you're watching television, you're living in Paddington, you've still got these habits that cost you a lot of money.
Well, it didn't really cost me a lot of money because I was shrewd, you know, I'd buy it and then I'd get the money.
And you've left this millionaire lifestyle behind in New Zealand, and you're watching TV, and there's an ad on television for a free offer. Tell us, this is the important part.
Yes.
In terms of your conversions.
Because through my life I'd been to a few fortune tellers and that, and I used to have dreams and things. I actually dreamt about the blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy and dreamt that I was going to be growing money trees. And then I went to another fortune teller that told me I was going to live in a beautiful mansion overlooking water, and that was the old guy that I worked for. And
but what have the fortune tellers told you about...
Then I went to one here.
About pyramids and in an afterlife.
That's right. I went to one when I was living in Brisbane.
And so now you get this offer on television, and it's an offer that relates to looking at archaeology.
That's right, the pyramids and everything. And I thought, well, seeing this other fortune teller had told me that I lived as an Egyptian dancer in my other life, which I thought, you know, I've never had any sort of things about that before. I thought, well, yeah, I'll get these DVDs. So I sent away from them, forgot about them. Then one day, the guy I was living with, him and I were sitting down having a wine and a joint and watching Chappelle Colby on TV, you know, poor girl, and sitting there thinking, oh, how can this happen to her? There can't be any God to let this happen to this poor girl. So then there was a knock at the door. I answered the door, and there was this handsome Chinese guy at the door. And I thought, oh, heck, what's he doing here? I didn't know whether he's a detective or what he was, because the house is full of smoke. And so he said, oh, I'm here to, you ordered the search video. And I said, yes. He said, oh, well, can I come in and just talk about it a bit? And I thought, oh, heck, okay then. I said, I'm half drunk and the place smells of marijuana. I said, please excuse the place. But he came, and he was such a good guy, and explained about the DVD and that, and so I said, okay then, I'll watch it, but don't think I'm going to be coming...
Because, yes, you had no interest in religion, did you?
No,
you
not at all.
You didn't feel you needed God.
No. Even though I was at that crossroads that time, I thought, nah, I'm just too bad, just fall over the edge and die, you know, that's me.
Sure. So you watch these, and we need to keep moving here, you watch these DVDs, and then you get an invitation to a seminar.
That's right. Yes. And so the DVDs were so wonderful, and he said, oh, I've got a seminar coming up at this building in the city. I said, well, I don't want to be going to church. I'm not going to be joining any religion or go to church or anything. He said, no, just come along, listen. And I went and listened, and it was just wonderful. I've been to all these different religions. The only religion I hadn't been to was Muslim, and none of them taught me anything about the Bible, and that's all I ever wanted to learn was about the Bible. And going to these seminars, I was learning all these wonderful things, and in the end I was racing around to get dressed, and if I thought I was going to be late, I'd grab a taxi to get to the seminar so I could get a good seat and listen. And then in the end, when the seminar's finished, Lyle said, if there's anyone that wants to come down to give their life to God.
And did you go down there?
My hand went straight up and I was down. Nothing stopped me. It just happened. It was just amazing. And then
there's some tears.
Yeah, and when I got down the front and we're having a prayer, and I just cried. I just couldn't stop crying, and I just felt uplifted, just something different. You know, you can't put your finger on it, but it's just something happened. And so I just kept coming back to these. I didn't realise it was church, and because I was just going to the second part where there was talks, and then they were saying, you know, you can come to the first part. We sort of have a church, and I thought, oh, okay, then I'll go to that. But it's because it wasn't in a church environment that it didn't scare me, you know. But then I was learning about that, and 3 months later I asked if I could be baptised, because we'd gone on this wonderful bushwalk to show about, you know, God's creation and that. And there was this little bay there, and I said to Neil, I said, gee, I'd love to be baptised down there because it's flowing water and overlooks Sydney Harbour, and it was beautiful.
And you were baptised there?
That's right.
And that was a wonderful day?
Yeah, because...
And you've joined God's family?
Yeah.
And you've been rejoicing ever since?
Absolutely. And I love the Lord. I thank Him every day for bringing me to where I am now. And I know through my life that He's been with me from the time I was conceived until now. That's and even coming up here now, I just thanked Him for, I've got nothing, but I've got everything I need.
That's wonderful. And so there's no comparison with life.
Oh, absolutely. I lived all the lives there are to live, good and bad, but this is the best. I love it, and I thank Him for it, for saving me literally, and bringing me to Him so that I can live in a beautiful kingdom, the one that He's preparing for me better than any other thing I've had in my life. It's just wonderful.
And I remember you telling me earlier on, Neila, that you felt God had been just so kind to you.
Oh, he really has. He's just everything in my life. I'm going through hardships now with my children, but I know He's there with us, with me and my children.
It's just a brand new life.
Oh, absolutely.
That I can see the joy all on your face.
That's what I pray for every day, for Him to be in my life and let me walk in His footsteps so His love can shine through me.
That's wonderful, Neila. Thanks very much for being with us. I know you've enjoyed this incredible story of amazing grace. We'll see you next time.